Bam, we are live. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining Quest with our self-directed Saturday event. I hope you have your coffee. We actually have a really unique speaker. He hasn't been on our specific platform before. So before I bring him on, I want to talk a little bit about Quest. So I'm letting everyone just give a chance and join in. As we kind of go through some of these motions, leverage the chat box. We have multiple moderators here that can either answer your questions. We also, if we have time, we might be doing a Q&A at the end of this with our up-and-coming speaker today. So before I dive into too much more, right, we're going to go ahead and just talk a little bit about Quest, right, and what we can do for you. So once again, thank you so much for joining our self-directed IRA Saturday event. I always like to kind of talk a little about who is Quest and why we like to host these type of events. So we are the largest self-directed IRA custodian in Texas, and within the next 10 years, I bet you we're going to be the largest in the U.S., right? We have a little over 20,000 active investors, right? Now, these active investors, because we are located in Texas, they're not just in Texas. They are everywhere in the U.S., and we even do business right now in 11 to 12 different countries, right? We have a little over 2.1 billion assets under management. Somewhere right around 100 employees, give or take. Sometimes it's more or less because we do have some interns, and well over $400 million in undirected cash. And I think this is important to understand this thing right here, mainly because this is what a lot of today's topic is going to be talking about in building a passive portfolio. That $400 million you see that Quest holds sits like a rock for all of our clients. It's not doing anything. So that money that's sitting there is our clients looking for their next deal, looking to lend money to someone else, looking to do a multifamily deal, looking to do something passive with that capital, right? Always a quick disclaimer, though, we're only doing this for educational purposes. No tax advice, legal advice, investment advice, right? Leverage the chat box, ask us questions as we go forward, and just kind of let us know what we can help you out with, all right? Don't forget, there's a lot of benefits to using a self-directed IRA, from diversifying your portfolio, the biggest one being the tax savings. I like a social investing side and always being able to invest in what you know best. So don't forget that there's so many different benefits to just setting up a self-directed IRA with us. And if you have questions about setting one up, you can always do a quick consultation with any one of our certified IRA specialists. Now, I always like to walk through real quick some of the steps. Always got to set you up an account. I charge you a whopping $100. Why is that? Your IRA with us is its very own entity. It has its own name, its own address, even its own level of asset protection. All right. We got to fund the account by doing a transfer or rollover. You locate investment, and then we're going to go ahead and complete some investment forms. This whole process you see can take up to 48 hours. So it's very quick, very fast. And in the real estate realm, we very rarely are trying to close on a deal in 48 hours or less. All right. So we always try to offer as many of these endless education classes as we can, from our weekly live classes that you're attending right now, from the self-directed IRA classes during the week to the Saturday events. We have happy hours that we'll be doing, right? And always find us on YouTube and Facebook, right? We're hosting so many events, and you can go back and rewatch all of them, 100%. All right. But if you do have any questions about this stuff, man, just reach out. It's pretty simple. Well, we're always here to help you out, and we don't use an automated system, right? So without any further ado, what I really wanted to do now is talk a little bit about our speaker before we bring him on up. I got to meet him at a Think Realty event, and he was introduced to me by one of our other IRA specialists, Kurt Power, who used to be the VP of a different company. And what's really funny is me and this up-and-coming speaker that you're going to see here in a minute hit it off. The reason why is he's been able to build a massive portfolio across the U.S., all right, all passively, working from one central location. In addition, he has helped people across the nation just building their own investments and building wealth. So, Marco, are you with me today? It won't add him. There it is. Bam. Hey, Marco, how are you doing?
I'm good, Derek. How are you?
I'm doing great. So I'm going to kind of let you talk a little bit about yourself. Remember, everyone out there, if you're listening, leverage the chat box. But thanks for joining us. I'm so glad. Where are you coming to us from?
I'm in Orange County, California. Beautiful sunny day.
Nice. Well, Marco, the stage is all yours.
Well, thank you, Derek. I appreciate you allowing me to come on and speak to and educate your audience here. I'm not sure when we can put the slides on, but I can talk a little bit more about myself with the first slide so people have a understanding. Perfect. There we go. Somebody's in control here. First of all, I just want to thank everybody who is listening in this morning to take some time for yourself to educate yourself on a Saturday morning. I think that's incredible because one of my top 10 rules of successful real estate investing is to educate yourself. So the fact that you are here and taking an hour out of your day on a weekend to do exactly that speaks volumes for you and you know what you're trying to do and achieve for you and your family. So today I want to talk about how to build a passive real estate investment portfolio and do that anywhere in the US while you're living anywhere in the US or in the world. It's something that all of our clients do. With our help, of course, and I've done and I have been doing for many, many years. So I'm going to share as much as I can with you today. I might talk a little bit quickly, but that's only because I want to get as much out and to you as possible in the hour that we have. And I want to leave a little bit of time towards the end for some questions if you have any. So with that, I'm just going to speak here on the side, and we're just going to kind of go off my slides because I've got a lot of bullet points in there that I want to share with you guys. So having said that, moving forward here, who am I? So real quick, I'm a full-time real estate investor. I am an author. I am the founder of Norada Real Estate Investments, and the company I started literally 18 years ago this month, being our anniversary, is a company that was a light bulb moment for me. Investors were coming to me because I was buying properties from 3,000 miles away, living in Southern California. I was buying properties on the eastern side of the US, from Florida to Georgia up to Michigan. And they were asking me for help. Can I be a coach, a mentor? You know, can I provide whatever services for them? And I said, I don't have time for that, but I see a lot of deal flow. So I'm happy to share that with you. And that's how the company was started, is I was basically putting the systems together to find the properties, invest in the properties, do the due diligence, and people wanted help. And so ultimately I just turned it into a business. So I purchased my first rental property when I was 18 years old. And it kind of sounds funny, but I had to wait until I was 18 years old because I couldn't qualify for financing as a teenager. But I did build a large portfolio over the years. I really pushed the gas pedal down hard when back in 2003, when credit was actually pretty easy to acquire. But I built a large portfolio over the next couple of years, and that was basically it. I was pretty much more or less done with real estate, but I continue to build the business. And I'm also the host of a podcast called Passive Real Estate Investing. It's typically a top 50 podcast on iTunes as a business and investing podcast. And I like to say that it's a show for busy people who want to learn how to build substantial income and create wealth for themselves and their family and create legacy wealth. And you can find that at passiverealestateinvesting.com. So enough about me. Let's jump in. One of the first questions I like to ask people, and I like to throw this question out when I'm in front of live audiences, is to finish the following sentence: ignorance is blank. And it's interesting to hear what people say. Most people, 90 to 95% of people, say ignorance is bliss, because that's what we've heard time and time and time again. Well, that may be true, although I don't buy that. To me, ignorance is expensive. Pew did a research study, and they found that the minimum income that you have to have right now to be considered upper class as a household of 4 people is over $160,000. And I'm sure that's gone up since that statistic came out, or that research came out. The truth is 69% of people are stressed with their lack of time and their financial situation. And another 69% are stressed by the perceived lack of money that they have in their life. So this is where you need to educate yourself and take action and learn what to do. And obviously, everybody listening in today understands that real estate is a powerful wealth creation tool. It is a powerful investment. It is one of the most tax-favored investments. And it's just a question of knowing, who to work with in regards to your team, where to invest and what to invest in. And that's just a matter of education. So ignorance is expensive because you don't know what you don't know. And what you don't know is costing you opportunity. It's costing you time. It's costing you opportunities to make money. It's holding you back. So knowledge is the new currency. Without it, you're actually going to be doomed to follow other people's advice without knowing if it's good or bad. But when you educate yourself, when you have that knowledge, what happens is it takes you from being a good investor to becoming a great investor. And that knowledge will actually help you to build that passive income that you want, as well as create wealth, long-term wealth for you and your family. So next time you hear that phrase, ignorance is bliss, think to yourself, no, ignorance is actually expensive. So the first step is to really understand the type of investor you are. If you don't know, you need to ask yourself this question. Are you a passive or active real estate investor? Well, what's the difference? The difference is this. An active real estate investor, I don't necessarily consider to be an investor, but for the sake of conversation, let's just say that active investors are those people who are buying, fixing, and flipping properties or wholesaling properties, or they're doing something that is really more of a business activity, or it's a transaction-based activity. And it's much like what you see on TV with, on HGTV and A&E, where people are buying and fixing and flipping homes. You can call that investing. And sure, you could make money. Of course, you can lose money. You could lose a lot of money. But the fact is you're operating a business. The moment you stop doing those transactions is the moment that income stops coming in. So it's more of a business than really being an investor. If you're a true investor and you want to be a passive investor, what you're doing is you're accumulating assets that generate income on a regular basis, whether it's annually, quarterly, or even monthly. And to me, that's passive real estate investing. And it doesn't matter whether they are promissory notes or income producing real estate somewhere in the United States. Whatever the asset is if that asset is creating income for you and you don't need to do anything for it, it comes in even while you sleep, then that's a passive investment, and that makes you a passive real estate investor. That's my favorite. That's why I titled my podcast Passive Real Estate Investing, is because I don't want people to be confused between fixing and flipping homes or wholesaling or doing whatever requires your active involvement. And it's really all on your shoulders. It stops when you stop. So I like to be a passive real estate investor. That's the type of education we provide freely all the time. And those are the types of people we like to work with. Our clients are all wannabe or active or even sophisticated passive real estate investors. Now, let's dispel a myth. I'm sure a lot of you listening in today probably know this, but it's certainly worth pointing out, and that is this. There's no such thing as a national real estate market. And this kind of drives me a little bit bananas when I hear the mainstream media or talking heads out there referring to the housing market, quote unquote, or the national real estate market, or they say, well, how's the real estate market doing? Or people ask that question very generically. The fact of the matter is there is no such thing as a national real estate market. There is no housing market that you can point a finger at a global level or a national level. All real estate is local, and you've heard that many, many, many times before. But all real estate is local. Every single market around the country. And by the way, there are over 500 metropolitan statistical areas, or MSAs, around the country. There are a lot more if you start including micro markets or sub-markets within MSAs, and what I'll refer to as tier 2 and tier 3 markets. But all of these local markets have their own local politics. They all have their local economies. That means they have their own supply, there are different drivers. Like, for example, if there's a large employer or Amazon moves in, that changes the dynamics. There's different drivers pushing people into that market, which is the population. And that population could be positive or negative. You look at a market like Detroit, who has suffered for decades, it's had for the longest time negative outbound migration. And so people are moving out. It lowers demand on real estate. And so that changes the economics, and it changes the supply and demand dynamics of that market. But every local market has its own business climate. Is it business friendly? Does it allow people like Tesla to move out of California and move to, Austin, Texas, or wherever? I think it was Austin, Texas. could be Houston, just pick up their plants and people and move. So it has its own supply and demand, and everything else wrapped around that is all local. The only thing that's kind of a macroeconomic factor are interest rates. And we'll talk about that for, a minute, a little bit later. So just understand that all real estate is local. There's no such thing as a national real estate housing market. When you hear people talking about that, what they're doing is they're taking the top 10 or the top 20 largest metropolitan areas in the country and putting that into a basket or an index. And that's typically what you hear referred to as the Case-Shiller index. And there's a top 10 and a top 20 markets Case-Shiller index. But that's just a barometer that's averaging out the largest, and I will add, the most expensive and least affordable markets in the country. So that is not a good index. It's not a good barometer to gauge the health of the housing market, quote unquote, or the local real estate market that you are looking at to invest in as a real estate investor. So I think it's good to know, the difference between the housing market in general terms and putting it in context as a local market. And you should be market agnostic. So real quick, investing locally versus other markets, I think this is worth pointing out. People who like to invest locally, meaning in your own backyard, have a comfort level. You're familiar with your neighborhood. You're familiar with the city you live in. You've been there for many years. You drive around and, you get it. So you feel comfortable. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best place to invest or the best place to put your capital or the best place for you to be investing in real estate. People who invest locally, meaning your own local market or backyard, are do-it-yourselfers. You're hands-on. You like to roll up your sleeves. And so that's all well and fine if the numbers make sense. Again, this is math. This is all about the numbers. Take emotion out of it. If you're investing, you should be investing objectively and, with rates of return in mind and a long-term perspective. You should not be mixing emotions into it. There's a perceived more control. I guess that's the best way to describe it. But is that really true? You might not even be the right person or the right professional that is, operating your business, managing your property, or fixing anything for that matter. So you might have a little more control, but it's sometimes perceived control, and it would be far better to delegate those tasks. And here's the big point. It's not always in your favor to invest locally, because the best deals are more often than not, found in other markets. And that market could be, an hour's drive from where you live, but it could also be 3,000 miles away, as it was and is for me in many cases. I'm here in Orange County, California, a very expensive market, very unaffordable, beautiful place to live. But I'm not going to be buying $800,000, $1 million properties or even $1.5 million properties as rentals when I can't rent them for high enough to cover the operating costs and the debt service on it. So the advantage is, investing in other markets, the right markets. So I'm just comparing the two here, investing locally versus investing in other markets. What you will find often, if you're looking at the right markets, and I said there are over 500 MSAs, you can find better cash flows, better returns, often better rates of appreciation. In other words, what you see happening in terms of price appreciation, as well as the potential appreciation within a market. And there are ways to determine that, which we'll talk about a little bit. So better cash flows, better rates of return, better appreciation potential. You can find markets that have better stability in terms of equity growth. There are two types of markets. There are cyclical and linear markets. I'll talk about that a little bit more as well. But you can choose the markets that have the characteristics that you want in terms of its historic and potential future price growth or price appreciation. So that's the other rate of return, is your equity growth over time, as well as your immediate returns, your cash on cash returns, which are cash flow. And you can choose markets that have lower risk than some of the markets you are living in or some of the markets that you are looking at right now. And risk often has to do with A, affordability, and B, land prices. If land values are overpriced, meaning they're inflated, you have greater downside risk, which means you have greater risk of prices correcting or coming down in certain events where interest rates go up, you go into a recession, there's a job disruption, or a black swan event. So keep that in mind. Now, what does this all mean? It means that, your local market may not be the best market. We've just talked about that. So what are the market differences? These are the things that we look at and consider. I spend literally thousands upon thousands of dollars a month in market research and market data to track what is going on in different markets around the country. And that all trickles down into the markets that we choose to be in and the properties that we provide to our clients that come to us for counseling, advice, or just investing. So what makes one market different from another is its own market cycle. So again, all real estate is local. We're not talking about a national housing market. So what happens in each market is similar. It may rhyme or may be correlated to other markets in terms of timing in that market, but they all have their own market cycle. They have their own market drivers. Again, I used Amazon as an example, but there are different things going on in a market that are driving that market, either causing it to grow, appreciate, or decline, causing people to come in, leave. What is building jobs or pushing jobs out to other states. Every market has its own median price and, of course, median rent. And these two factors are important because we're going to talk about that here in a second, something referred to as the rent price to rent ratio. Property taxes vary, dramatically from state to state. They're calculated differently, and that may impact your cash flows. Affordability is an important factor to consider. And then the rent to value or rent to price ratio. And that is simply this. It is what is your monthly rent as a ratio compared to the property value or the purchase price. Here's the hypothetical example, and we're going to come back to this again a little bit later. But let's just say, hypothetically, you bought a $100,000 property and it rents for $1,000 a month. Well, you divide that $1,000 into the $100,000 purchase price and you get 1%. That is a 1% rent to value ratio, or RV ratio for short. I will get ahead of myself and just tell you that what you're looking for ideally is something that has an RV ratio of about 0.7% as much as 1%. It's much harder to find the 1% today across the country because property values have appreciated so much and they've outpaced rent growth, even though rent growth has been astronomical across the country. So if you can find a 1% or something close to that property in a good neighborhood, that's the key factor, fantastic. Then do your due diligence. But if you're in the 0.7-ish to 1% range, then you're doing well. When you get down below 0.7, you are in high-priced markets like coastal markets, coastal California. Here where I live, you're finding RV ratios around 0.3, 0.4, and maybe 0.5%. Those numbers don't really pencil out. In fact, you have very low cap rates and almost, very paltry cash-on-cash returns. So it's not exciting. If you're a speculator, it might work for you, but that's not one of my recommendations. Don't be a speculator as a real estate investor because those are two separate things. So what is the solution? Knowing all this, the solution is simple. It's really to invest in the best markets that produce the best returns. That means you need to be market agnostic, as we are, and it's something I've been talking about for about 18 years. You don't marry yourself to a market. In fact, for that matter, you don't marry yourself to anybody. You build your team, you vet your team, you trust your team, but you're not married to a market. You're not married to a provider. You're not married to anybody. You have to be the CEO of your own business, make your own decisions, make them prudently, without emotion, and understand that you're investing your hard-earned capital and you want to put it to work and send it out there to come back with more capital. In other words, you want to increase your cash flows and you want to increase your unrealized gains, which is the equity growth in your property. So, big picture, there are three basic kinds of markets that we talk about, that we look at. And when we are having conversations, when my investment counselors are talking to clients and investors, we talk about your investment goals and what you're trying to achieve. What are your objectives? Well, it comes down to three basic types of markets that you would be put in or counseled on or educated on. The first is what we refer to as cash flow markets. These are markets that have higher RV ratios, rent to value ratios. These are markets that produce stronger cash on cash returns because they have higher cap rates. And 3 examples here. All these examples are markets that we operate in. We're in about 25-ish markets right now. We don't have inventory in all the markets all the time. It ebbs and flows. But I'm giving you examples of markets that we already invest in, and markets that we have inventory in, because it would just be easier to relate to that if we ever have a conversation. But cash flow markets are Birmingham, Huntsville, Memphis, Tennessee. A lot of these markets are in the Midwest, parts of the Northeast, and peppered throughout the Southeast. So these are cash flow markets. They are. That doesn't mean they don't have appreciation or even future appreciation potential. They do, but it's not as strong as the stronger growth markets. Which leads me to the growth markets. These are markets like Atlanta, Cape Coral, Florida. In fact, a lot of the markets in Southwest Florida, Houston, Texas, although Houston is transitioning right now, and San Antonio, Texas. And then you've got hybrid markets. Hybrid markets are a combination. They're kind of transitioning between a cash flow and a growth market, or they've just been pocketed there for a while, and they've got good appreciation and good cash flow, and they're really not changing on that spectrum between cash flow and growth, but they're doing well, and you get kind of the best of both worlds, and that's what I like to refer to hybrid markets as. And some examples of those are Indianapolis, Chicago, Jacksonville, Florida, Kansas City, Missouri, not Kansas City, Kansas, Baltimore, and several markets that we're in southern Pennsylvania. So these are the 3 market types. Now, how do you select a market? You always take a top-down approach. You got to start with the macroeconomic factors, and these are typically the fundamentals. It all boils down to fundamentals, and this is all going to be common sense, or at least I hope it is. So there's 4 key things that we look at. There are many other things as well, but these are 4 key drivers that help us select markets. The first is the type of market, and I talked about this briefly. What kind of a market is it? Is it a linear or cyclical market? Meaning, does it just chug along and appreciate upward a little at a time, on average, over time? Or is it more of a market like you see in many of the coastal markets, like in California, over the years, over the decades, where it will appreciate very strongly for a number of years. Sometimes it hits double-digit rates of appreciation in various markets around the state. And then it corrects and comes down and depreciates in recessions or harder economic times. So you could look at these as being stable markets or volatile markets. It's the same as just driving on a straight road versus riding on a roller coaster where you have ups and downs. If you are into market timing and you actually think you're good at it, or you know how to do that, you can time the markets and 1031 exchange in and out of markets over long periods of time. You don't do this in a 6-month period. You do this over a 3 to 10 year period. But you could ride the wave, as they say, with cyclical markets, or you can just build your portfolios in different markets, in stable markets, and basically put it on autopilot, have them professionally managed, and just forget about it and let them just appreciate over time, as the real rate of inflation will naturally appreciate those properties, and just collect the cash flows and grow the cash flows over time. So there's more of a tendency to invest in stable markets than volatile markets for many reasons. 2, diverse metropolitan areas. What I'm talking about here is job diversity. Is there job growth in that market, and are the jobs across the industries diversified? Because the more the job diversification in a market, the greater the stability in that market. So you want to be in markets that have ideally a stable job market, preferably a growing job market, meaning there are a lot of open jobs and there are not enough people to fill those jobs, because that brings people into that market. They move from other places where they can't find employment, and it provides greater stability. So you don't be in a one-trick pony market, a market that would have something like, let's just say, heavily dependent on oil and gas. And we saw this in North Dakota years ago, where there was tremendous growth, but it was really driven by that one industry and that one, that one vertical. The diversity is important. And this is one thing that's kind of interesting about Houston. Houston, even though a lot of people think about it being, a kind of an oil and gas based industry or job market, it really is very resilient because it has great diversity in terms of jobs. So diversity is important. Landlord friendly is important. And I don't mean to sound political, but the reality is that blue states tend to be very unfavorable for landlords. Red states tend to be very favorable for landlords because the tenant landlord laws are not stacked against the landlord. They are not skewed or biased, towards the tenant. So generally speaking, typically what we find are red states have very fair tenant landlord laws for landlords. Last but not least, the rent to value ratio. And we talked about this already, but you want an RV ratio that is as high as possible, obviously. Ideally over 0.7%, as close to 1% if you can get there. But you don't want to sacrifice the quality of neighborhoods in order to achieve that, because the lower the quality of the neighborhood, meaning the lower neighborhood grade, the higher that RV ratio goes. And that's dangerous. So you got to be careful about that. But that's a good segue into the next section here, which is all about neighborhood types. Now, I'm going to talk about three. You can probably categorize neighborhoods as A, B, C, and D, and maybe even F. But really, we only want to focus on three, the A, B, and C. And here's how I'm going to define those. So I'm going to start with C. And there's a reason I'm going backwards here. C-class neighborhoods, generally speaking, and we got to put this into context, are within the markets that we operate in. So those 20 to 25 markets are the quote unquote cheaper priced properties, or the less expensive properties. Now, this is not a hard and fast rule. It is very much market specific. And this is just a frame of reference. So don't take this number literally. But C-class neighborhoods within many, not all, many of the markets that we are in are properties that are up to about 100, 110,000. It's sometimes a little more in other markets. It's less than some markets. But your C-class neighborhoods, which are often your lower income type of areas, and I don't mean like distressed areas. I'm just talking about lower income, like you're definitely blue collar, but lower blue collar areas. Are areas that are going to have property values from 80 to 110,000 or so, plus or minus. They have higher rent to value ratios. And this is what I was telling you about before. As you drop from A's to B's, B's to C neighborhoods, your RV ratio, your rent to value ratio goes up. And don't let that deceive you. You don't want to fall into a trap of focusing your portfolio entirely on C-class neighborhoods because you want the higher rent to value ratios and the higher cash on cash returns. So the reality is these look good on paper. They do. They look really good on paper, sometimes very sexy. But the two issues I have with C-class neighborhoods, and I've owned properties in C-class neighborhoods. In fact, I still own some property in C-class neighborhoods. Anecdotally, to some degree, but generally speaking, they have, over the long term, higher turnover rates, and they have higher vacancies. And that is costly. As a real estate investor, you don't want vacancy. You want your properties leased as much as possible. You want fewer turnovers, and you want consistency in your income. There are a lot of people who do very well in C-class neighborhoods. They crush it, and they have really good cash on cash returns and rates of return. But you got to understand the potential risks. And here's one big factor that I don't like about many, not all, but C-class neighborhoods. You can run into financing issues because these are not essentially retail-based neighborhoods in terms of retail sales. You will see more financing issues because appraisers that are out appraising the property have a harder time finding sales comps, enough of them, and recent sales comps to justify purchase prices. And so you will sometimes, maybe often, find your appraisals come in short because you don't have enough good quality retail sales comparables in C-class neighborhoods. Let's look at B-class neighborhoods. So Bs are what I like to refer to as the hybrid markets. They're a good middle ground between your As and Bs. Again, very, very much market specific. So this is, you have to always put these into context. But generally speaking, they're properties that are between 110 to 150,000, sometimes 180 in some of the markets that we're in right now. But again, I'm just kind of averaging out the 25 or so markets we're in right now. They have moderate RV ratios. They do look good. Often 0.8, maybe 0.9% RV ratios. So they do look good on paper. They do cash flow. They do have acceptable or good cash on cash returns. They have lower turnover, low vacancy, and they are easy to finance. They have sales comps. They are retail areas. This is your bread and butter community. This is a blue collar, some white collar type of demographics. So I really like Bs. In fact, my personal sweet spot is B plus and A minus. If you really want to put it on a range. So let's talk about A's real quick here. An A class neighborhood is essentially the higher priced areas. No, I'm not talking McMansion areas. I'm talking, kind of the right side of the bell curve, the higher end, but not high end. So these are often between 150 to 180, but often over 180 in many of the markets we're in today because the last 2 years have seen such strong price appreciation. They have lower RV ratios. They don't look as great on paper in terms of cash flow and cash on cash returns, but don't let that deceive you, especially if you're investing in new construction, which is a lot of what we're doing today, are new construction properties that are essentially built for renters in mind. So they're beautiful properties with they're well located and well appointed because they have the tenant in mind to attract them to start with and keep them for the long term. But they also, A-class neighborhoods tend to have the lowest turnover and the lowest vacancies. So as far as stability and predictability, your A-class neighborhoods obviously are going to outperform the Bs and Cs. And there are very, very few financing issues, if any. So what is my personal qualifier? It's real simple. It's this. If the neighborhood you're looking at does not have retail buyers or very few, I wouldn't be buying there, because if and when you need to sell, either sell to sell or sell as a 1031 exchange, you need that liquidity. You need buyers there. You need to have comps. So you need retail buyers. If there are very few to no retail buyers in an area, go somewhere else. There are tens of thousands of areas around the country that you could be looking at. So this is one of my personal qualifiers. Now, a real quick example. This was one of my properties that I bought years ago in Kansas City. It was just a very nice 3-bedroom, 2-bath, fully renovated turnkey property that actually I bought it for less than $145, but at $145, the rental income was $1,400. So you could see the rent to value ratio at that time was $1,400. Now this property is worth closer to $180 today. The rental income is, I think, closer to maybe 1650, 17-ish, probably 1650. So the RV ratio has dropped, but that happens over time. You're going to find that with your own portfolio. But great property. This happened to be at that time and still is an A minus type of neighborhood. So my reasoning for this property is because it was Kansas City at the time was a hybrid market. I got good cash flow, good growth. So don't let your eyes glaze over on this next part of the slide. There's a lot of numbers here. This is just a screenshot from the calculator that is attached to every single property on our website. By the way, as a side note, our website can only show about 5%, maybe 10% of the properties available at any given time because the turnover is so quick that our team has an impossible time of keeping up that inventory in real time or even near real time. So just understand that there's a lot in the pipeline, but it doesn't necessarily show up on our website. But any property that is on our website has this automated calculator that you can modify, by the way, in real time on the website. So you can play with your own scenarios. But what I wanted to point out are the red boxes. So this particular property was generating true net, like net after vacancy allowance, which you'll see on the screen here, after deducting for maintenance and repairs, so having a maintenance reserve, had a cash flow of $3,000 a year or $255 a month, true net cash flow. And so that, that translates obviously into a cash on cash return of 9%. But there's two factors here. You've got cash flow and you've got equity growth year after year after year. Over time, that grows, for two reasons. You amortize your mortgage and you have appreciation because of the market fundamentals, the drivers in the market pushing prices up, which is price appreciation. But real estate will appreciate over time naturally because you also have true inflation from monetary policy, from just the inflationary environment that we're in. So the real rate of inflation will increase the value because of the pricing of the bricks, sticks, copper, and concrete that go into property. So it's becoming impossible to replace a property for the cost that you bought it, the price you bought it. The cost to rebuild goes up, which just naturally increases the value of your property. So you have equity growth, which is your wealth over time. You have your cash flow, and then that translates to what you see at the bottom there, your cash on cash return, as well as your real rate of return, your return on investment, which I refer to as your total return on investment, which adds up everything, your cash flows, as well as your equity growth in the property, divided into your down payment. That becomes your rate of return, your return on investment. For you guys listening in that are into commercial real estate or understand more advanced calculations in terms of rates of return, if you take 5 years and you look at the IRR, the internal rate of return of that property over the course of 5 years, as if you had sold it after the end of 5 years, you would see that your total rate of return in terms of what are referred to as internal rates of return is over 33%, which is phenomenal. Show me another investment that you can get into in the real world here that will provide rates of return like that. So this is not an atypical example. This is actually a typical example. Now, as we start to wind things down here, I've got about 3 or 4 slides here to kind of tie all this together. I think it's important to understand what an investment property should be, especially what we define as a turnkey investment property, which is a term that I marketed the bejesus out of back in 2004 when I started this business. And then everybody kind of picked up on the term and started using it on anything and everything. And people don't even have a definition for what turnkey is. So unfortunately, everybody's definition is a little bit different, but here's what we believe turnkey should be and what you should be investing in, or as close to this as possible. So a turnkey investment property is a property that is in a stable or a growth market. Remember, you want to focus on the market first because you need to take a top-down approach. You want to be in a desirable neighborhood, a good neighborhood. Define your investment goals and your investment criteria and take that and decide what neighborhoods you want to be in. But they should be in desirable neighborhoods. You want those properties to be either new or newly renovated. So another way of saying this is you don't want any deferred maintenance. You want cash flow positive properties, ideally 99% of the time. There are exceptions to this rule, but far and few between. But if you can get positive cash flow within a year or two of a particular property for whatever reasons those may be, that's okay as well, especially if it's a strong growth market and the appreciation potential is stacked heavily in your favor. You want that property to be leased ideally, but if not, in the process of being leased, because there are going to be turnovers and transition times, especially with new construction. You want it to be under professional, full-service property management, unless you're doing the management yourself, which is fine. Some investors do that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we do like to put things on autopilot and have professional full-service management managing those properties. And last but not least, you want to carefully select your properties with tenants in mind. You want it to be in good locations, desirable, an attractive property, good curb appeal, well-appointed inside, because you want to attract them and keep them. So if I was to break this down into a simple 5-step process, it would be this. Start, and we do this with every client. When you talk to an investment counselor, this is the process they take you through, whether you have it or not. But you need to define your goals or your objectives, and then break that down into criteria, because you need a compass to show you where you're going. And that criteria will help make your decision-making process very simple. You want to pick the best markets that meet those objectives or goals, and you want to focus on the best neighborhoods that are going to help you achieve those financial goals. So you want to build a portfolio with the market and neighborhood in mind. Assemble the right team. Your team is going to be roughly about 10 people, but 5 core. That is your property acquisition person or team, your lenders or lending team, your property manager or managers, your asset protection attorney, and your tax advisor or tax strategist. That's your core 5. You want to now choose turnkey properties within those markets and neighborhoods that you like and approve of and meet your criteria. And then at that point, you put it under contract, you do your inspections, you continue your due diligence, which you've done some of before putting the property under contract, because you are reviewing those properties and choosing the best one or best ones. But you contract, inspect, and then work with your lender, get the financing in place, and ultimately close. And that can happen anywhere from 30 to 45 days after you've put the property under contract. So that kind of wraps it up. 2 quick slides here. If you want more information about the stuff that I'm talking about, there's a free download on our website called The Ultimate Guide to Passive Real Estate Investing. It's on our website, free download, no obligation. I'm just going to throw this up real quick, just so you know it's available. If you do download that, you will get a free copy of my upcoming book, which is almost done. It's in manuscript form, sitting here in my office. But we will be releasing digital versions of this for free, and then there's a paperback available for just the shipping cost. And last but not least, the podcast I do every week, Passive Real Estate Investing, which is at passiverealestateinvesting.com or on iTunes or anywhere and everywhere podcasts are available, including Amazon Alexa. And then, for anybody wanting a deep dive, we have these free strategy sessions, which goes deep into everything we just talked about here, but as it relates to you in your own personal situation. That's it, Derek. I don't know if we have time for questions, but I tried to wrap it up in 45 minutes here.
No, yeah, you killed it, man. So one of the things is usually everyone always is I'm gonna ask you a couple of just questions from myself personally real fast, and then I'm sure we'll get some from the audience. But ultimately, one of the things I notice is as you're kind of looking through these properties, how are you really going through the motions of locating a lot of these investments outside of the state you operate in? Like, I mean, obviously I operate in Texas, so when I network and when I'm working with individuals, it's easy for me to talk to someone locally. But what is your main strategy then for getting the investments out of where you live?
Well, it's a good question. So having done this for 18 years, we obviously have a lot of relationships, but it's essentially teams or boots on the ground. So we have teams in each of these markets that we've, chosen to be in for the reasons we discussed in this, in this presentation. And so what we do is we meet with and vet built new construction and home builders and full scale. If you have a team that is buying 20 to 40 distressed properties a month, and they have crews that go in and renovate those properties and bring them into new condition and essentially make them what I called turnkey. Those are operators that are basically working in the background, under the radar. They're not public facing companies. So they basically partner with us. They provide us their inventory, and then we make that available to our clients or investors that are working with us. So we work with providers that are renovating properties as well as new home builders that are building new construction homes and fourplexes and duplexes to provide us that inventory. So it's really our relationships and our teams on the ground that we work with.
I think that's key, because a lot of times people think they just get into real estate, but they don't have to network. They don't have to talk to you. They don't have to build a relationship with someone. And that's, I think, the biggest key that a lot of times people miss. So,
yeah.
We got a quick question here from David. David's asking, how do you research markets you're considering? So if you're considering maybe a new area, so like I know you said you're in Kansas, or, if you're looking at something in Texas, like what are you doing for those type of research aspects?
The 2 biggest things, I mean, you could look at a lot of things and get lost in the data and that just becomes more granular as you go. But the 2 biggest factors when you're looking at a market, a metropolitan area, or even a sub-market within, a metro area like Atlanta being, 7 million people in the MSA, the Atlanta MSA, you can break that down into, 50 to 100 different cities and sub-markets. So you need to be granular to some degree, but the two biggest things that are going to put tailwind in your investing success are jobs and job growth. So it's all about jobs. And two is migration. So jobs keep people there and bring more people in. Migration is what brings the people in, drives the demand up for the real estate market, because when people move into a market, it creates demand. So now you need more rentals and you need more homes being built or new housing units brought in to house these people, because they need a place to live. They're there because they have family or they have, employment or both, but they need a place to live. So you need to fulfill that and meet that demand by providing supply. And the supply is really new construction that comes into a market. If there is no new construction or lack of it, what happens is you have an imbalance. You end up becoming a seller's market. You have an imbalance where there's not enough supply to meet the demand, and that pushes prices up, and then ultimately pushes rent rates up as well, because they are a lagging factor with pricing. So those are the two key things.
Now I got the questions coming. We got like 15 of them. So we're going to go ahead and just kind of jump through some of these, because we may not be able to get to all of them, Marco. But yeah, I liked this one that kind of popped up. And, he has some IRAs and with rentals in them, but he's thinking about pretty much selling his properties and switching over to notes and just being a lender. How do you feel about that? Because I know a lot of what you talked about today is having those turnkey properties. So have you ever considered switching to the lending side versus the homeowner side?
That's a great question and a difficult question, because we're talking about two different assets. We're talking about hard assets, your real estate, that gives you essentially 5 benefits. And then you have paper assets, which are your promissory notes, which are one-dimensional in nature. They provide predictable, regular income. And by the way, we do millions of dollars of promissory notes. I mean, that's
I know you're a lender as well, so that's why I think it's a great question.
Yeah, well, actually, we provide that as an investment opportunity for people wanting to get 12 to 15% per year rates of return, but that's a paper asset. So here's the difference. With our promissory notes, as an example, you can lock into a 2, 3, or 4 year term and get 12 to 15% or more per year interest rates, which is sexy, it's beautiful, and it's that very passive, very, very passive, predictable income. But when that note matures after 2, 3, or 4 years, it's over. Party's over. You get your principal back. You made a great rate of return, and it's done. With real estate, it's an asset that you can keep forever, continues to produce income, continues to appreciate. It's a great inflation hedge. It's leverageable. You could leverage it, up to 80% in, outside of a self-directed account. It's up to 50% in a self-directed retirement account of some kind. And it provides amazing tax benefits. It's the most tax-favored asset class available today. Again, that's outside of a self-directed account, because you can't take advantage of those tax benefits in a retirement account. But so you're basically saying I'm comparing one fruit to another. They're both fruit because they're both good investments, but they're two different types of fruits, an apple and an orange. So the question is what do you want? Do you want to create wealth and grow that equity and have, a certain amount of cash flow from your real estate, something that you can carry on forever and pass on to your family, your heirs? Or do you want that cash flow from the paper assets like the promissory notes I was talking about for a fixed period of time? You need to answer that question, because I can't answer the question for you. I can't put words in your mouth, but they're two different things, but they're both investments.
Yeah, they both can be good. So
yes.
For you and your company and your teammates and stuff like that, what type of properties are you typically looking at? Are we looking at just like single family homes, townhouses, multifamily type things? Are you kind of looking at all of them, whatever makes sense as a deal?
Well, I don't know if the question is about me personally, what I'm buying, or what our clients are. I'll answer both, about what our clients are purchasing. So as a company, 80% of what our investor clients are purchasing are single family homes. And and today, like over the last couple of years, they've become increasingly, like to a large degree, new construction homes. But the bulk of it is single family, about 80%. The other 20% are made up of duplexes and fourplexes and triplexes. So nothing over a 4-unit. So that's all considered residential real estate, or single family, duplex, triplex, fourplex. Me personally, most of what I purchase are single family homes, but there are a sprinkling of residential multi-unit, which means duplex, fourplex. Does that answer the question?
I think so, yeah, because at least that's how I interpreted it.
Okay.
Kind of went through it. Just because we do have so many questions, Marco, I'm going to bring back up your slides real fast. Can you go back on some of those slides so we can get your email address and how people can get in contact with you?
I didn't know I had it up there. I don't think I have my email up there.
Let's see.
But I will say this. There's a contact form on our website.
Okay.
You can reach my whole team through that, not just myself. Where is it? Yeah, there it is. So if you submit a question on that contact form, my assistant will route it to me or whoever the team member is that needs to answer it.
I love it. Now, guys, if you did enjoy this class, we always here at Quest are hosting so many different types of events where we want to bring in people that, just like Marco here, that can really help out, that can sit here and answer any questions that you may have. Now, ultimately, let's see. Oh, yeah, we do have some big events coming up that you can RSVP for. We're going to have one of our moderators put up some of those events right now. But as we just kind of come to a close, do you have any last-minute statements, Marco, maybe you'd like to mention?
I can continue talking for about 4 hours because I have a lot that I could share. At the end of the day, I was actually telling my daughter this the other day, and even my wife. I just as a reminder, there are 3 kinds of people in the world. There are those that make things happen. There are people that watch things happen, and there are people who wonder what happened. It's important to be, most of the time, as much as you can, the person that makes things happen, which means you need to take action. So educate yourself, build your team. And if that means, helping you do that, fine. But educate yourself, build your team, and take action. Start investing. If you're already investing, just continue down that path and, maybe accelerate, because I'm very bullish on real estate today. Historically low interest rates. There's a lot of opportunities out there. We are not meeting the demand, the organic demand in this country. We need over 1.5 million housing units per year right now, and that is for the foreseeable future, and we're not meeting those numbers. So demand is strong, supply is not there. And so for many reasons, I'm very bullish on real estate. So educate yourself, take action, build your team, and continue investing or get started.
I love it. And guys, I have a link up there right now for any of our other up and coming events. So that's our YouTube channel, and here's the Facebook aspect. But make sure you guys are registering, right? The more people we get registered for these events that you can check out and see, absolutely, then we can bring in more speakers just like Marco. So, Marco, I know you've been a client of mine for now a little over a year. Robert, was just one last question. Can we use a self-directed IRA for any of the investments you mentioned today?
This is a little known secret, little gem, actually. Well, actually, let me get some clarification. Is the question, can you invest in your self-directed IRA, or can you get financing?
I mean, let's go. I'm going to say
do both.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yes, you can invest in real estate. Yeah. Well, Derek, I think you know the answer to this. But yes, you can invest. You can buy real estate and hold that real estate in your self-directed retirement accounts. No problem. But the thing that most people are not aware of, interestingly enough, is that you can get financing, non-recourse financing in your self-directed account up to a maximum of 50% loan to value, which means that you only need a 50% down payment and still borrow the other 50%, where there's no UBIT taxes and there are it's completely separate from you. It's non-recourse that allows you to buy and leverage in your self-directed accounts. And we have that financing available.
Absolutely. And that's one of the unique things, because you became a client of mine just about, I'm going to say,
about a year?
Yeah, a year and a half ago. And you set up a solo 401k. And so, guys, we always talk about self-directed IRAs, but don't forget, you can schedule a consultation with us. We set up solo 401ks as well. Marco, man, you've been awesome. Guys, I know I didn't get to everyone's questions. I still have about 25 of them here. So make sure you check out Marco's website. He has those free books. You have classes and stuff to help everyone out. Just let us know what we can do for you and let Marco know what he can do for you. So, Marco, thank you again for coming on. You've been amazing. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Derek, and thanks to your whole team. You guys are awesome. I love working with you guys.
Yeah. So, Marco, don't go anywhere yet. So, guys, we're going to go ahead and end the broadcast, and I'll see you guys all around. Thanks, everybody.